Mr. Speaker nominee Javier Martinez, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First off, tell our viewers, who is Javier Martinez? Where did he grow up? Who's his family?
Yeah, so I grew up the first 8 years of my life in Ciudad Juarez, just south of the border. I was born in El Paso, 1981, and at the age of 7, in 1989, my father, who worked in construction, brought the whole family here to Albuquerque, and this has been home ever since. I grew up in the International District, right in the middle of the La Mesa neighborhood, and my parents are actually still in that area. I've since moved. I'm in the North Valley now, and very proud to represent House District 11, which is the downtown core of Albuquerque.
Since you've become a lawmaker, I've noticed you've had an interest in education, income inequality, immigration. But what keeps you up at night as you've gotten to this point? What really hits your core and your heart about why you're doing the work you're doing?
Yeah, making sure that New Mexico's working families get a fair shake. For far too long, our families did not get that fair shake. We gave away the tax code to out-of-state corporations and the wealthy and put that burden on the back of working people. I'm proud that in the last 8 years that I've been in office, we've worked very hard to reverse that. And now we're at a point where New Mexico is leading this country in terms of policies that benefit working families across the state.
Speaking of that, the legislature, they're going to be walking into an additional $2 billion in surplus. There's a lot of ideas of what should be done. Should we do tax cuts? Should we invest it in certain programs? But from right now, where should that money go?
That's a great question. I think we need to keep building the services and the programs that New Mexicans sorely need and desperately want. Things like quality public education, access to college and higher education, quality early childhood education, inclusive of pre-K childcare, home visitation, and all of the other services that children need prenatal all the way to the age of 5. In addition to that, we're going to continue to work on the tax code to make it more fair and just for working families. That includes rebates for families, and that includes increasing things like the child tax credit. New Mexico is one of very few states with a statewide child tax credit that is built upon the federal one, and we have a chance to increase that to put more money in the pockets of working New Mexicans.
That early childhood education bill, that's something you were very passionate about. Got approved by the voters to the constitutional amendment. You guys still have to vote and pass a resolution so they can go to Congress. But the Congress is going to be controlled by Republicans here. Are you confident that a Republican-controlled Congress will approve this bill that New Mexican voters approved?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of our congressional delegation and all of the work that they have been doing, not just now, but over the last 10 years, as you know, as we've waged the battle to invest out of our permanent fund in early childhood education. When you look at the vote results from last month, and over 70% of New Mexicans support the idea, a majority of Republicans in New Mexico support the idea, I have no doubt that whoever controls the Congress will do the right thing and ratify this vote by New Mexico voters.
In a perfect world, what kind of legislation would you like to see go on the governor's desk in your first 30 days as Speaker?
First 30 days, that would be very ambitious. I would probably think more the first 55 days by the time we start getting legislation up to the governor. But I want to see tax relief for working families. I want to see legislation that ensures a quality education for kids from pre-K all the way through college, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their family name, regardless of the language they speak at home. And I want to double down on our efforts to diversify New Mexico's economy. As you know, we've made great strides over the last few years, including the legalization of recreational cannabis, to begin to take ourselves off of the oil and gas addiction that we've had in this country for many, many years. We will continue to do that work, and we will continue to do it for the benefit of working people.
Do you think that if you're pushing tax relief, that's very unusual for a Democratic leader to say this, but do you think that could also be coupled with tax reform, reforming the code? Because that's something that has seen some bipartisan support, but it usually needs a push from the leadership.
Sure. Look, I've sponsored now or co-sponsored 3 or 4 major pieces of tax legislation that have resulted in net tax relief for most New Mexicans. At the same time, we have reformed the code in every single one of those bills. We've done things like restructure our gross receipts tax so that we can bring down the rate and broaden the base a little bit more. We've done reforms to the personal income tax code, which for years, the administrative assistant making $30,000 was paying the same tax rate as the owner of the company who makes $30 million, right? We've undertaken a lot of those reforms over the last 8 years, and we will continue to do that. What's important for people to understand is that the tax code is very complicated, and it's not just here in New Mexico, it's across the board, right? I like to joke that tax codes across the country were written by accountants and lawyers, right? To keep themselves employed probably. At the end of the day, we will continue to make those reforms, to make the tax code more fair, more equitable, and to simplify the code as well.
This state continues to struggle with poverty. I mean, we were ranked 49th, 50th. Republicans usually say, well, Democrats have had control of both chambers for years, nothing's changed. You can also say that about Mississippi. Republicans have controlled both of their chambers for years, nothing's changed, and they tend to be 49th and 50th. So my question to you is, we haven't been able to grasp and tackle poverty. Is there anything that you can do long term? You mentioned early childhood education that can finally turn the state around and address its income inequality and poverty?
I think access to quality early childhood education is the long-term transformative strategy, but it's long-term, right? It'll take years for us to see the results. There's a lot of stuff that we could do though in the meantime. The Kids Count report that came out 6 months ago or so and showed us 49th, 50th. One of the takeaways from that report from the group that published it, New Mexico Voices for Children, was that because of the pandemic, right, we had rates of poverty that otherwise we may not have had, given a lot of the tax work that we've done, a lot of the poverty alleviation work that we've done the last 6 years. I'm confident, I'm sure that in the next Kids Count report and the ones that come after that, we'll begin to see the needle moving a little bit more on those conditions. Now, keep in mind, New Mexico is not a poor state, right? And I've said that time and time again. New Mexico is a wealthy state. We've got vast natural resources. We've got vast wealth tied up in our permanent funds, as you know. The problem is we have not invested that money in targeted, effective ways that uplift most families. Keep in mind, in 2003, we had a tax bill that reduced the rates for the highest earners in half, and we placed that burden on the backs of working people. What happened 6 years later? The Great Recession. And state government in New Mexico was essentially broke because we didn't have the resources coming in. That is one of the things we have to be very cognizant of moving forward, is making sure that New Mexico can not only continue to fund government services, schools, healthcare, education, pre-K, but that we can fund those at quality levels so that they yield quality returns. And that's what I'm most proud of, right? Over the last 8 years, we've begun that process, we've begun that movement. We're not gonna undo 100 years in 6 years, but I can tell you we are well underway.
When you take that gavel, you will be presiding over a body that has probably its highest number of women lawmakers in state history since we become a state in 1912. What could you do as Speaker to make sure that women lawmakers have a voice in legislation on the floor and what stuff comes to the floor?
Yeah, no, great question. Look, it is no secret that particularly the House Democratic Campaign Committee, which is the political arm of our caucus, has made it a point over the last 6 years to recruit, to develop, to train diverse candidates from across the state, including women, people of color, and people who live in many of our communities. Part of that process is because we want to diversify not only our caucus, but the entire chamber. And I'm proud of the work that we've done, and I'm proud of the numbers that, as you know, we have a majority of our members are women. Most of our committee chair positions are with women. Those positions are very important in terms of how legislation moves or doesn't move in a legislature. And then if you look at our leadership team, our number 2 and number 3 leaders in our caucus are 2 women, one of them a woman of color, the first Indian American to serve in in a position of leadership in the New Mexico legislature. So I'm beyond thrilled, excited, and I can tell you some of the most transformative legislation I've seen in my 8 years in office has been carried and pushed through and passed by women.
On that note, the diversity, it's a strength, but also could be a challenge because the Democratic Party is a big tent party. You still have divisions, even though you have a majority between urban versus rural, between progressives versus moderates, even between, just be honest, Anglo versus Latino or Hispanic versus Native American. How are you as a speaker going to work with this coalition to make sure there's not splits that could kill legislation?
Look, I'm a big believer in, as you know, diversity in all its forms, including cognitive diversity. I don't want people to just agree with me, and I don't want to just have to agree with other people. It is in those debates, it is in those discussions, it is in those arguments that legislation is improved and ultimately passed. I've seen it time and time and time again with the bills that I've carried and bills that I've helped others carry and pass. The Democratic Party is a big tent party, and I'm very proud of that. Anyone who wants to be a part of our caucus, who wants to caucus with the Democrats, is welcomed. And that's a philosophy that I've carried for a long time. I got started in politics as a community organizer, where I didn't have the privilege to pick and choose who my partners would be. I had to work with whoever was at the table and whoever wanted to work with me to improve the lives of our community members. And I've taken that into politics, and I will continue to take that with me into the speaker's chair.
Now, this is a state that is majority minority. Almost 50% of its residents are Hispanic. But in recent years, it seemed like white progressives from Santa Fe have controlled the Democratic Party. Do they hold too much influence in the Democratic Party?
You know, I'll disagree with that notion. I mean, I think that the Democratic Party is controlled by our grassroots, by our activists, by the moms and dads who are working every single day to put food on their families' tables. I think these distinctions between, whether it's white progressives or brown progressives or whatever the case might be, I even don't really like the word progressive, to be honest with you, right? Because we're all just trying to do what's best for the state.
Do you like the word liberal?
I personally like the word liberal a little bit better. I think it better defines who I am. But I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a long list of bills where I may not be in agreement with the liberal base of my party. And there's a long list of bills where I may not be in agreement with the moderate part of my party or even the conservative side of my party. At the end of the day, it's about doing what's best for New Mexico. It's about common sense solutions to bring relief to the people who need it most. The unhoused, right? Those struggling with drug addiction. Children with families who are struggling with homelessness, drug addiction, or behavioral health. Those are the things that matter to me. And whether you call me progressive, liberal, conservative, moderate, so be it.
Margaret Montoya, she is the well-known UNM law professor and also a pioneer scholar in critical race theory, known around the world. She's also your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
How has she influenced you as you've gone on this journey?
Wow, that's a great question. She has influenced me more than I can ever express to her and more than she'll ever know. I'm part of those groups of first-generation college students and first-generation law students, right? So that pipeline narrows the further you get, as you can imagine. And she is someone who, before I even met her daughter, was bending over backwards for students like me to be able to take our lived experience and share that with, in my case, the law school, right? There are many times when I didn't feel like I belonged in that space, but it was professors like her, and her specifically, who would look us in the eye and say, absolutely, you belong here. Your story matters. To me, I wouldn't be an elected official. I wouldn't be a very effective community organizer. I wouldn't be an effective lawyer if it wasn't for her. And I know that I'm not alone. She is known across the world, really, and she has mentees from coast to coast who call her and email her and send her Christmas cards all the time. And I'm just honored to be a part of her family now.
In her last 30 seconds, as I mentioned, she's a pioneer in critical race theory. If you get an anti-critical race theory bill on your desk, is it dead on arrival?
Critical race theory is an academic theory that oftentimes is offered as an elective course, usually in graduate programs. I cannot think of any bill that would be anti-critical race theory that would ever reach my desk if the sponsor knows what they're doing, and generally they don't. I've already seen 2 or 3 bills in previous sessions, and they're completely irrelevant to the discussion. Sure, probably dead on arrival, but probably won't even get that far.
Thank you, Speaker nominee, for joining us.
Thank you.